Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the College Football Playbook podcast. I am Marc Givler, joined by Tyler Shoemaker. Again, this is our continuation of conference previews, I guess you could call them. It's more of a gambling preview than an actual college football preview. We'll actually be getting into some more deeper analysis on teams and conferences from a kind of player perspective type of thing at a later date. This is kind of the early gambling edition of the conference previews. And we just did the Big 12 yesterday. Today it's the SEC. Always fun to talk about the SEC. Love it or hate it. It's incredible entertainment. The personalities at some of these programs and coaches make it kind of must-see TV. It's almost like a soap opera with some of these schools. And it's definitely one of the leagues you got to tune into every Saturday. So, Tyler, you've done your T-shoe index, your projections for the season, over under totals, power ratings, etc. Let's bring these up. For the SEC, you've got Alabama winning the West, Georgia winning the East. I don't think any of that's particularly shocking. What is maybe surprising is Georgia is 10 points better than any team in the East, and Alabama is even 4 points better than any team in the West, which is a pretty good gap. When you were putting this together, anything that jumped out to you or caught you off guard?
I think the one thing that people may have an issue with that I did spend a lot of time looking at is Florida and where they're at, because I've actually got them in my overall ratings. They're, I think, in the mid to low 20s. I've got them third in the East. And I think a lot of people, I had someone tell me on Twitter that Florida is a dumpster fire right now. And I'm like, well, why do you think that? Because they're recruiting pretty well. And Billy Napier, I mean, his track record at Louisiana of building a program was exceptional. So I think I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to get the Florida ship rolling in the right direction. So I've got them rated probably higher than most. I know, they've got Utah in week 1 in a rematch of a game that they won in the Swamp last year. And I know my number on that game is way tighter than what the current odds are on that game. So spoiler alert, I'm probably going to be betting Florida plus 10 at Utah this year in week 1.
Is it really plus 10?
Yeah, well, I think at most spots right now it's 9.5, but you'll be able to get a 10. Everyone is on Utah in this.
Wow, I did not realize that. We'll do it. We'll do a week. We'll do like an early season episode, like previewing like the first week of the season and stuff like that. That'll be coming down the pike here. Probably when we're done with the conference previews. But here's what I think is interesting. 2 things as I look at this. One, Georgia's offense is actually the highest rated offense in the league. That was just not even necessarily disagreeing going into the season. It's just kind of an interesting little nugget there, because I don't know. I think like Tennessee and LSU, like there's even Alabama, like you think kind of big offenses, big points. You don't really think, you kind of think defense with Georgia, but here they are with the highest offensive rating. I'm going to be a contrarian this year in the SEC. I don't think Alabama's going to win the West, and I think they're going to lose at least 3 games.
Oh, coming in hot.
And that just like, and I hate saying I'm not anti-Alabama. I'm actually very pro Nick Saban generally. He's incredible, but I just, something's off with this team this year. I think, I didn't love the new coaching hires. I don't know how you replace Bryce Young at quarterback with a guy Buckner. with Buckner, and I don't think that was the right play. To me, it said a lot about what they think of their quarterbacks on the roster, which is scary. Or else you've given Tommy Rees way too much power over your program already, one or the other. The schedule's not easy. They actually got a really tough schedule this year. You don't lose Will Anderson and get better. Dallas Turner's a stud, but Will Anderson was a generational pass rusher. I don't think you get better there. So if you're thinking like, okay, well, the offense is going to take a little bit of a step back. You lose Jahmyr Gibbs, you lose Bryce Young, but the defense will make up for that. I don't really see how that's going to happen. I know they've recruited extremely well. Trust me, I cover recruiting for a living, been doing it for almost 20 years. I know the type of players they land, but you lose Will Anderson, and then you lose all those veterans in the secondary, like Brian Branch and Jordan Battle, just the leadership, the veterans, the guys who are going to be in the right place at the right times. And you throw all of this together with which a schedule I think is very difficult. And I think LSU is probably going to win the West, and I think Alabama is probably going to lose 3 games. I don't think they're going to be. I'm not convinced they're going to be Texas at home through the beginning of the year. I don't.
They arguably should have lost last year. Yeah.
Yeah. I just. Am I crazy? I know your numbers say I'm crazy, but do your eyeballs say I'm crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy. And my numbers, even though they have Alabama first in the West, like they still have Alabama going under their season win total. So from that standpoint, the numbers would support what you're saying. The hard thing with LSU is, again, they're another team in year 2 of a new coach. I did give them some benefit of the doubt. Even from the kind of early release of the preseason TSI that we did back in the spring, I've elevated LSU from there because the more I thought about it, they deserve some more benefit of the doubt with Brian Kelly in year 2. So I went back and looked at kind of how he had developed at Notre Dame and kind of applied that moving forward. So I mean, LSU beat them last year, albeit in a really close game. But if LSU beat them again this year, I don't think anyone would be floored by that. Texas, certainly not an easy game. I don't know where the third loss comes from. Maybe Tennessee again. Seeing Nick Saban lose to the same team in the regular season 2 years in a row would be bizarre, I think. But it's certainly within the realm of possibility.
Well, if you're looking for a third loss, I could give you a few potential ones and just assume they're going to falter at one of them. I think Ole Miss will be competitive. Lane definitely wants to get a W over Saban. I love Quinshon Judkins. I love what they're doing there. I think that will be difficult. I think the game, and I was on them so bad last year. I rode them so badly last year, but I'm pulling back a little bit on that this year. And the talent at Texas A&M is too high to be as bad as they were last year. Again, you're going to get them on the road. And look, I don't think, Iron Bowl's on the road. We've seen weird things happen in the Iron Bowl. So they could easily drop one of those. I just one of my favorite under totals this entire year is Alabama under 10.5. Now the problem is you're probably have to lay -160, -170 juice if you're seeing better than that, please comment on this video so I can go find it and place some money on it. But I'm seeing -170 most places for the under 10.5 on Alabama. So I think even Vegas is hinting toward a 10-2 season, which isn't 9-3, but it's Alabama goes 10-2 again and doesn't make the SEC title game or the playoff. And those trust fund babies in Tuscaloosa who just don't know anything but winning are going to have a problem.
Is Nick Saban on the hot seat?
Yeah.
Marc Givler says Nick Saban's on the hot seat.
The Alabama message boards are going to put Nick Saban on the hot seat, and I'm going to be on here telling them how crazy they are. That's what's going to happen. But it's going to be an interesting year for Alabama, I think. I don't know. I think they're another year away from getting back to maybe what we've seen, and they've got to find a quarterback somewhere along the way because I still don't know that they have one. We'll see how that goes. Well, they have one coming in. Love Julian saying that's if they could have got him in this year, maybe to get a year of experience for next year. But it's going to be interesting. I think up there this year, it's going to be an interesting team to watch. And like, I'm not like some big LSU homer. I want to say I didn't like the Brian Kelly hire. I thought the Brian Kelly hire was a really bizarre fit.
Very weird for sure.
Like culture wise, just personality wise, it's a very odd marriage to me. I think Brian Kelly's a fantastic football coach. I think he did a great job at Notre Dame, an amazing job at Notre Dame. But I just didn't really think, sometimes it's just personalities and culture. You kind of have to have a certain type of person for your program. And I didn't love the fit there. And boy, they were playing just about as well as anyone there by the end of the year. He had them playing really well. They got talent at some of the most important positions. Jaden Daniels is a difference maker with his legs at quarterback. The dual threat quarterback is kind of a great equalizer. That's one I kind of love. At this one's pretty right down the money. I'm seeing, or right down the middle. I'm seeing minus 115 each way on the over under of 9.5. Let's quickly look back here at your numbers, and you've got them at what? You've got them at 9.8. So you've got them just over 9.5. Obviously you can't win 9.8 games, but you can't win 9.5 games either. So, that's leaning over, right?
Yep.
Is that leaning enough over to actually bet it? At minus 115?
At minus 115, again, let's look at run through their schedule quickly. Yeah, I mean, their win probabilities are really high. So it's not, what that means is they're not playing a bunch of 50-50 games essentially. Yeah, I would take a nibble on some LSU over 9.5.
I think the interesting thing about their schedule are the road games. Like they're at Alabama, they're at Ole Miss. Is that Florida State game a road game, or is that a neutral field game?
It's neutral.
Okay, that's what I thought. But even so, it's away from home, and they're such a good home team. So that would be the argument, I guess, against them getting to 10 wins is too many tough road games. But quite frankly, I'm looking at this right now, and I'm not the TSIs, the Givler off the cuff knee-jerk reaction index is telling me they're the best team in all 12 games they play.
Yeah, and that's fair.
So that's an over I really like, and we'll get into some of my other favorites here as we move through the conferences. There's one in the Big Ten I absolutely love, which may actually surprise some people, especially not just surprise people that I would think that, but also just given my history of kind of bashing this team. It's going to be interesting. But yeah, LSU is one of my favorite overs. You project A&M. So it looks like your projections are kind of in line with me on A&M, where they can't be that bad again, right? So you've got them at almost 8.5 wins. So that's another.
They were tricky. Yeah. They're kind of in that Texas category of like their talent rating every year is so good, and then it just does not translate to any meaningful success. So very, very difficult. I kind of ultimately I landed kind of with you, like, okay, they can't be as bad as last year. So I kind of went back the last few years and was like, okay, what's their ceiling? Because they're the number 4 most talented team according to my weighted rankings. So I mean the potential is there. It's just, can they put it all together, and can Jimbo get out of his own way? So we'll see.
Looking at their schedule here, and I was going to kind of say the same thing about LSU. And I said this about Texas on our Big 12 show with their early game against Alabama. So many of these teams I'm looking at seem to have a big non-conference game, first 2 to 3 weeks of the season, which will largely dictate whether they go over or under.
Yep.
For Texas, it was the game against Alabama. For LSU, it's that game against Florida State. And for Texas A&M, it's that road game against Miami, because they're not going to lose at home to New Mexico. I don't think they're going to lose at home to Louisiana Monroe. They get Auburn at home out of the gate. So they play 3 home games the first 4 weeks. And they get Alabama at home. They get I don't even know who freaking ACU is. Is that Abilene Christian or something?
Yeah.
They're a we'll call them a full participant in Chicken Shit Saturday, the second to last weekend of November. You get South Carolina at home. Mississippi State. I mean, I can 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beat Arkansas on the road. Tennessee's kind of a wild card. Yeah, they can get there. They can get to 9. But here's the thing: their Vegas over unders, it's 7.5. Now it's minus 160 to take the over. But maybe you go and you push it up to 8. I don't like doing that. Generally, pushing it onto like a round number where you can actually push.
Yeah.
I don't particularly love that, but for this one, it might make sense. You probably get about even odds, right?
Yeah, I was going to say it really just depends on the odds that you get associated with that number. I think is really the key factor, though. But I mean, and looking at their schedule and their win probabilities, like I think they're more likely to win 9 games than they are 7. Now I'm going to end up on freezing cold takes, but I think they're more likely to win 9 than 7.
That was my exact thought, which is why I'm like, well, maybe if you think they're going to win 9, don't take 7.5 at minus 160. Take 8 at minus 110 or whatever that would put you at that point.
Exactly.
So that's what I was thinking there. Because I'm with you. I think it is more likely they'll win 9 than 7. So
with you.
We'll see. Another team here. Again, I think total wild card is Tennessee. You've got them rated very high. You've got them like dead heat with LSU in terms of their power rating. You do have them winning, half a game less, 9.3 to 9.8, but you got them winning over 9 games this year. Can you kind of talk through, your process on Tennessee and kind of how they were able to stay that high despite losing all the talent they lost?
Yeah, and they really could have been higher. The rating I ultimately landed on with them was more of a conservative approach, just because they haven't really earned the benefit of the doubt to think that they can replicate what they did last year. Last year seems, at least in looking at their historical trends, last year seems to be more the outlier than the expectation. So I was a little more cautious with them. But in terms of talent, I mean, they are 18th in the country, so respectable, but significantly below, some of the elites at the top. So I think they're going to have a fine season. I don't think they're going to necessarily be in like playoff contention because, one, they're not going to beat Georgia, and again, I've got them at 9.3 wins. So I don't think they're going to have some like national championship type season this year. I think they're going to be good. They're going to be a solid team. They're going to be like a Penn State maybe type of team, but that's really their ceiling, I think.
Vegas has it right on the button on 9. I think it's like minus 120 for over, minus 110 for under. So it's not a huge difference either way. It's a pretty straight bet. I'm looking at the schedule here, and you got, Alabama on the road, Florida on the road, Georgia at home, but I don't think they're going to beat Georgia this year. And then you've got a couple losable games at home too with A&M and South Carolina. Obviously to bet the over of 9, you've got to be pretty confident they're going to win 10 games. I don't see 10 wins on the schedule. I think 9. I think the under is a good play here because I think their ceiling is 9-3. I think you're pushing if at worst, but that would be my pick on this one. I don't know if I'll actually play it or not, but if I had to, I would probably go under. Yeah,
their schedule is pretty tough, and I mean they go through a sequence of Florida, who again I'm much higher on than most. They have at Florida, and then sandwiched between Florida and South Carolina is a home game against UTSA, who I have as the number 1 group of 5 school this year. So that's going to be their Super Bowl. So I can pretty much guarantee you right now, as we sit here in June, I'm going to be betting UTSA against Tennessee on September 23rd.
Wow. So you might be going against the numbers too. just kind of talking it through and looking at things, would you take the under at 9, or would you take the over despite, he's got your projection just over 9?
Yeah, because the projection is so close, it would just be a stay away for me at 9.
Gotcha. Let's move on to the 2-time defending champion Georgia Bulldogs, who you have rated far and away higher than the rest of the league, and I think pretty far and away higher than the rest of the country, if I'm not mistaken. Georgia's your number 1, right?
Yep, Georgia's my number 1 in the country by 4 points, which is about the same margin between number 3 and number 8. So they're a very clear number 1. They also have by far the easiest schedule in the SEC. Their schedule is pretty putrid. I mean, it's hilarious because I assign win probabilities based on what the projected spread is. So if the projected spread is 21 points or higher, your win probability is 100%, because very rarely do you see a 21-point underdog win the game outright. And Georgia has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of their games. They have a 100% win probability. The 11th game against Florida is 98%, and their toughest game at Tennessee is a 73% win probability. So, I mean, their over-under is 11.5, and I've actually got them going over it at 11.7.
I've said this before. I don't think there's a particularly logical argument against Georgia for the national championship this year. I think the only argument you can formulate against Georgia this year is it's just too hard to three-peat. You can't argue it from a talent perspective. You can't argue it from a odds of making the playoff perspective. They are far and away the clearest path to the playoff because their schedule's terrible, but they will not get punished for it. They can lose a game. I don't care who it is. I don't care. If Georgia goes 12-1, or let's even say they go 11-1 and don't make their conference championship game, they're still getting in the playoff.
Yep.
100%. They've built up so much, goodwill over the last couple of years with their performances that they're not going to be kept out of the playoff, even with a loss on a terrible schedule. So, and I've said this a million times as well, I can argue against every team in the country not making the playoff this year except Georgia. I can tell you why, this is why Ohio State or Michigan or Alabama or Texas wouldn't make, or USC, this is why they won't make the playoff. And none of those teams are slam dunks to make the playoff. Georgia is a slam dunk.
Yep. You
can write any other team. If you bet any other team, I think you're risking not only not losing the bet, of course, but I think you're risking that team not even making the playoff. I don't think there's many other slam dunks out there.
Nope, I'm with you. They have everything in place to coast to the playoff.
And quite frankly, there's a lot of places they might be better than last year. It's really going to come down to, does their quarterback not screw this up? Because they're going to be pretty equally talented at some of the skill spots, but their defense might be, they have so many. I've been talking to a lot of Georgia people the last few weeks. They had so many young guys playing on defense last year, maybe not even necessarily starting, but a guy like Michael Williams is going to be just an absolute terror this year. They may be better at 70% of the positions this year than they were last year. So I think that's, again, I don't know how, someone's going to have to really develop throughout the year. Something's going to have to really click for somebody, and then they're going to have to put it all together by the end of the season. I guess that's the good thing. If you're the rest of the field, you don't play Georgia. You don't have to worry about beating Georgia in a winner take all week 1 or week 2. You can, you've got your 15 weeks or whatever it is to build your team and to get some cohesion and improve. And then you just got to get them one night. So that's really the only argument. To me, it's as clear cut of a favorite going into the season as I can remember.
Yeah.
So I think it says a lot about Georgia, but also says there's just a lot of, I have questions about Alabama. I have questions about Michigan. Ohio State's offensive line, I think, has some questions. Is USC going to play any defense this year? There's a lot of things to kind of unpack. You're really going to roll with Texas, really, after how many times do you have to go through that exercise? So I usually wouldn't even bet on the national champion, but I'm almost certainly going to have something on Georgia to win this year because there would be such a huge favorite to me. But
no, I agree 100%.
Anything, let's kind of look back through the numbers here. Kentucky's a little interesting to me with 7. You actually project them to have more wins than South Carolina and Florida. I'm not sure they're a better team than I guess it's interesting. So how do you handle them losing Will Levis, who was maybe the most polarizing player in college football last year in terms of evaluators?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I'm sure a lot of people are curious how this type of thing factors in. So my ratings don't necessarily factor any one player specifically. It's more of an aggregate talent rating, and then again how that team and or coach has developed what talent they've had in the past according to the end of season TSI rating. So I didn't necessarily go in there and say like, oh, well, they lost Will Levis, I need to do this to the power rating. But I do keep an eye, quarterback obviously being as important as it is, I do keep an eye on that. And they have Devin Leary coming in from NC State. I'm not saying he's Will Levis, but I am not the biggest Will Levis fan. So if you told me if you told me Devin Leary plays as well or better this year than Will Levis did last year, I wouldn't bat an eye. Like, okay, that makes sense. So I don't offensively at the quarterback position. I don't think Kentucky's going to really skip a beat, honestly. So it didn't impact their rating.
You've got Vanderbilt at 3 wins. I'm kind of curious. Let me see what their over-under is in Vegas.
It is.
Can't say we're not covering this thing top to bottom.
Yep. Their
win 3.5. You're paying minus 160 for the over. So that's a firm under for you.
Yep. Yeah, I mean they have
you can get the under at plus 130. I mean, that sounds to me like you're telling us to all run to the cash machine and go hammer Vanderbilt under 3.5.
Yeah, I mean the scary thing with their season win total is 2 of their basically for sure wins are coming the first 2 weeks of the season in Hawaii and Alabama A&M. So then you've got to sweat out the rest of the schedule and hope that they don't just strike gold one day. I mean, really, according to the win probabilities, the only other game they really even have a prayer of winning is at UNLV, where they have a 50% chance to win. The rest of these games are 22% is the next most likely, and that's against Auburn. 20% against Missouri, 12% against Kentucky, 11% at Wake Forest, and then a bunch of 0% because they're going to be such heavy underdogs to a lot of the SEC teams. So, yeah, I don't see 4 wins here because even if they beat Hawaii, Alabama A&M, and UNLV, where's their 4th win coming from? I don't see it.
At Florida, at Mississippi, at South Carolina, at Tennessee. And so their last 6 games, they're at Florida, home Georgia, at Ole Miss, home Auburn, at South Carolina, at Tennessee. So it's going to just be, by the time they get to like that South Carolina game, they're just going to be beaten to a pulp.
Yeah, I don't see it. I honestly, they may only win 2 games. They may start out 2-0 and then go 0-10 from there. But
they're going to start out 3-1, and everyone is going to be sweating the last 9 weeks of the season. This is how it's never easy. Doesn't matter how ridiculous the line looks. It's never ever easy.
That would be poetic, but again, even if they do manage to start out 3-1 and beat UNLV, they're not beating an SEC team this year. I can't see it.
Yeah, because I mean, if they lose to UNLV, you can almost cash. I mean, you can't; they won't let you, but you can be. I think you pretty much cash your ticket.
Yeah, I mean,
that's now the blocks 2-2.
That's the swing game right there. Is UNLV like you said? If they lose that, like the under is pretty much a lock. Yeah. I think even if they win that, I don't know where you're going to find another win. So I think getting plus money on under 3.5. I think we've come to the conclusion I'm betting that. So
anything else before we wrap this one up? Look back, one last look at the numbers. Yeah, it just looks like well, LSU A and M are kind of close in 2 and 3, but it almost looks like you've got, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Tennessee, and then kind of everybody else in the league.
Yep.
So Florida 6.6. Is that schedule based?
No, I mean their schedule is actually really difficult. I think they've actually got.
That's what I'm saying. Like, is that why you only have them projected at 6.6 wins, even though their power rating?
Oh, I see. Yeah,
is higher than Kentucky and Ole Miss, who you have winning 7.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see. Like I said, I'm prepared for the blowback if Alabama wins the title this year, or even if they just win the SEC and go to the playoff, because I'm not seeing it this year. I think someone else is going to come out of the West, and I don't think Alabama is going to be in the playoff again. But we'll see. And I'll also eat it if Georgia trips over themselves too. So I've been pretty emphatic about those two teams pretty much all off season, but we'll see who's right and who's wrong here eventually. We'll get to the other 3 conferences here quickly, so you guys won't have to wait too long for the next few, but hope you enjoyed the first 2, and leave feedback in the comments. Like I said, we'll have Tyler's index stuff, the spreadsheets and things like that linked in the description box so people can check them out and hopefully help them make some money. But appreciate everyone watching and listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.